My name is Janice, and I'm 20 years old. I never expected my life to turn into such a mess, but I guess that's what happens when family and money get mixed up together. I'm 20 years old. I'd always been determined to make it on my own. When I got accepted to college on a full scholarship, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. The scholarship covered my tuition completely, but I still needed somewhere to live. That's when my mom came up with what seemed like a perfect solution. "I've been thinking," she said one evening while we were sitting in our kitchen. "You know that apartment I got from your grandmother 4 years ago? Why don't you rent it? I'll give you a good rate, much lower than what you'd pay anywhere else in that area." I did some research, and she wasn't lying. The rent she was asking was almost half of what similar apartments were going for. It seemed like a no-brainer, even though I knew I'd need to get a job to cover it. "You'll need to sign a proper lease agreement," Mom insisted, pulling out papers she'd already prepared. I always do things by the book. Within a week, I'd found a job at a cafe near campus. It wasn't exactly glamorous, but between classes and work shifts, I managed to make ends meet. Sure, I was exhausted most days, but it felt good to be handling things on my own. My routine was simple but demanding. Wake up, go to classes, head straight to work, come home late, study until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, repeat. It wasn't easy, but I was making it work. Or at least I thought I was, until that Thursday evening when everything changed. I remember it perfectly. I'd just finished a particularly rough shift at the cafe. All I wanted was to collapse on my couch and maybe watch some mindless TV before tackling my homework. But when I opened my apartment door, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, sprawled across my couch like she owned the place, was my sister Anna. 2 large suitcases sat beside her, and she was scrolling through her phone, completely at ease. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still standing in the doorway. She barely glanced up from her phone. "Oh, hey, I'm moving in with you. Mom said it was fine." I immediately pulled out my phone and called Mom. My hands were shaking as I waited for her to pick up. "Mom, what's going on? Anna says she's moving in here. Is she going to pay rent too?" Her response hit me like a slap in the face. "Are you crazy, Janice? What kind of stupid questions are you asking? Of course, Anna's not paying rent. You'll keep paying what you've been paying, and she'll live there for free." "What? That's not fair. If she's living here, she should pay half the rent." My mother's voice turned sharp, that tone she used when she wasn't going to book any argument. "Listen to me carefully, Janice. That apartment belongs to me, and I decide who pays what. If you don't like it, you can move out right now." After Mom's ultimatum, I looked at rental listings in the area, but everything was way out of my price range. So I swallowed my pride and accepted the situation. Meanwhile, my sister had never learned to be considerate of others, and living with her was like having a tornado as a roommate. Every morning, I'd wake up to find lights blazing in empty rooms, the kitchen, the living room, even the hallway. She'd leave them on all night, every night. "Anna, could you please remember to turn off the lights when you leave her room?" I asked one morning, trying to keep my voice level. "The electricity bill." "Oh, stop being so uptight." She cut me off, not even looking up from her phone. "It's not that big a deal," but the lights were just the beginning. The real nightmare was her bathroom habits. Anna would lock herself in there for hours, literally hours, taking endless baths while chatting with her friends on the phone. The sound of running water became the soundtrack to my anxiety. One evening, while preparing for an exam, I could hear her splashing and laughing through the bathroom door. The water had been running for over 2 hours. "Hey, Anna," I called out, knocking on the door. "You've been in there forever. Do you realize how much water you're wasting?" Her voice came back muffled but irritatingly cheerful. "Chill out, sis. I'm having a spa day. Mom says I can do what I want." I retreated to my room, trying to focus on my textbooks while calculating the probable cost of these spa days in my head. When the water finally stopped running, 3 hours had passed. The day the utility bill arrived, I nearly fainted. The amount was double what I usually paid. Double. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the numbers, wondering how I was going to manage this on top of my other expenses. That evening, I confronted Anna. She was sprawled on the couch, feet up on the coffee table, watching videos on her phone at full volume. "We need to talk about the utility bills," I said, holding up the paper. "They've doubled since you moved in. You need to be more conscious about the water and electricity usage." Or what? She finally looked up, a smirk playing on her lips. "Or you'll need to find somewhere else to live." That got her attention. She sat up straight, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, Mom specifically said I can do whatever I want here. You're supposed to serve me, remember? That's what Mom said." Something snapped inside me. All the frustration, all the unfairness of the situation, everything I'd been holding back, it all came bursting out. "Pack your things," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Get out now." "This isn't your apartment," she screeched, jumping to her feet. I'm the one paying for it, and I say you're leaving, now. For a moment, we stood there in a standoff. Then Anna started throwing her things into her suitcases, cursing under her breath the whole time. She slammed drawers, knocked things over, and made as much noise as possible while packing. Finally, she dragged her suitcases to the door, turned to me one last time, and spat out, "You're going to regret this." Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I had barely caught my breath when my phone started ringing. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I knew this was coming, but my hand still shook as I answered. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Who do you think you are to kick your sister out?" "Mom, she's been shut up. You had no right." She was practically screeching now. "Pack your things and get out. You hear me? Either you get out, or I'm doubling your rent. Your choice." The fury that had been building inside me for weeks finally boiled over. "You know what?" I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. "I'd rather pay 5 times as much somewhere else than spend another minute dealing with this crazy situation." Before she could respond, I hung up. I stormed into my bedroom and yanked my suitcase from under the bed. I started throwing clothes into it, not even bothering to fold them. Tears of anger blurred my vision as I moved around the apartment, gathering my things. When I got to the bookcase, I began pulling out my textbooks. They were heavy and awkward, and my angry movements made them slip in my hands. Frustrated, I slammed the bookcase door shut with all my might. That's when it happened. Several thick books I hadn't noticed on top of the bookcase came crashing down, hitting me square on the head. "Just perfect." I rubbed my head, glaring at the fallen books. That's when I noticed something flutter to the ground. A piece of paper that had fallen out of one of them. I bent down to pick it up, thinking it was probably just an old receipt or a forgotten bookmark. But as I unfolded it, my heart stopped. It was a legal document, clearly photocopied but still perfectly legible. At the top, in bold letters, it read "Last Will and Testament." My grandmother's name was right there, along with the date, just a few months before she died. My hand started trembling as I read through it. There it was, in black and white. My grandmother had left money to my mother and Anna, and this apartment, this very apartment I'd been paying rent for, had been bequeathed to me. I sank to the floor, the wheel still clutched in my trembling hands, as memories came flooding back. Everything started making horrible sense now, like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too blind to see. My mother's voice echoed in my head from 4 years ago, right after Grandma's funeral. I remembered sitting in our living room, surrounded by relatives, as Mom made her announcement. "Mom left everything to me," she'd said, her voice steady and convincing. "All the property, all the money. She wanted me to handle everything." She'd looked around the room, meeting everyone's eyes with such sincerity that no one questioned her. I remembered raising my hand timidly, like a schoolgirl afraid to ask a stupid question. "But Mom, why didn't Grandma leave anything to us? To Anna and me?" The look she gave me, that mixture of pity and irritation, was burned into my memory. "Janice, these things are complicated. It was your grandmother's decision, and we need to respect that. You just have to accept it." Accept it? Those words hit differently now. I'd watched in the months that followed as Anna suddenly started sporting designer clothes and the latest iPhone. Mom and Anna went on a shopping spree in Paris and Milan, a mother-daughter bonding trip, they called it. 2 weeks touring Europe while I stayed home, working a summer job at the local grocery store. Now I understood. The money they were spending so freely, the shopping sprees, the European vacation, all those expensive gifts for Anna that had been Anna's inheritance. They'd spent it right in front of my face, probably laughing at how I never questioned it. And this apartment, my apartment. They hadn't just hidden it from me, they'd made me pay for it. Monthly rent, utilities, everything. I'd been working my fingers to the bone at that cafe, stretching every dollar, while living in a place that was legally mine. The bitter irony of the lease agreement hit me like a slap in the face. I could practically hear Mom's voice. "We need to do everything properly, Janice. I'm very particular about these things. Everything needs to be properly documented and filed." I let out a harsh laugh that echoed in the empty apartment. Particular about paperwork, except, apparently, when I came to telling her daughter that her grandmother had left her an entire apartment. That little detail had somehow slipped her mind. The more I thought about it, the more memories surfaced, each one taking on a new, darker meaning. All those times Mom had reminded me that rent was due, how she'd lecture me about responsibility while I handed over money for an apartment that was rightfully mine, the way she'd smile when I'd thank her for giving me such a good deal on the rent. And now, just hours ago, she'd threatened to kick me out of my own apartment. My hands were shaking as I held up my phone, carefully photographing every page of the will. I made sure each word was clear and legible before hitting send to my mother. The message showed as delivered immediately, and seconds later, 2 blue check marks appeared. She'd seen it. I stared at my phone screen, watching those three dots appear and disappear, appear and disappear. My mother, always so quick with a response, so ready with an answer for everything, was at a loss for words. I could almost see her sitting there, probably at her kitchen table, frantically trying to figure out how to spin this. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30. The dots kept appearing and vanishing, like a Morse code of panic. Each time they appeared, I tensed, waiting for her response. Each time they disappeared, I felt a grim satisfaction. Let her squirm. It was almost exactly an hour later when my phone finally rang. I took a deep breath before answering. "Janice, sweetie." Her voice was artificially calm, the kind of tone she used when trying to smooth over a problem. "This isn't what you think." "Really?" "Because I think it's exactly what I think. I've been meaning to tell you about this for so long," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "I just never found the right moment. But since you found out now, you can have the apartment. It's yours. Let's just forget about this whole unpleasant business and start fresh." I let out a harsh laugh. "Start fresh? You want me to just forget everything? Forget that you had Grandma's will from me? Forget that you tried to kick me out of my own apartment just hours ago? Forget that I've been paying you rent for almost 2 years for an apartment that actually belongs to me? Janice, please." "No, Mom, I want every penny back. Every single rent payment I've made to you. I want it all back." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its sweetness. "You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I? After everything we've done for you? You'd sue your own mother? After everything you've done to me, you mean? You stole my inheritance, made me pay rent on my own property, and then tried to throw me out when I wouldn't let Anna freeload here. So yes, I would dare." I hung up. My hands were trembling as I opened my banking app and started scrolling through my transaction history. 23 months of rent payments, each one meticulously documented. I'd always been good with keeping records, something Mom had praised me for. Ironically enough, I pulled out my emergency savings book and started doing calculations. Without having to pay rent anymore, I could actually afford to hire a lawyer. A good one. I've been saving every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of paper related to this apartment since the day I moved in. The law office was quiet and professional, with dark wooden furniture and walls lined with legal books. I sat across from Miss Roberts, watching as she reviewed the documents I'd brought. The will, my rental agreements, bank statements showing all my payments, everything I could find. "This is quite straightforward," she said, looking up from the papers. Her expression was a mixture of sympathy and professional interest. "Your grandmother clearly left you this apartment in her will. Your mother had no legal right to collect rent from you or anyone else." I leaned forward. "So what can I do?" "You're entitled to compensation," she said, pulling out a legal pad. "Not just for the 23 months you've been paying rent, but also for the 2 years before that when your mother was renting it to other tenants." We spent the next hour going through calculations. Miss Roberts was methodical, breaking down everything month by month. "The regular rent payments you made, plus the rent your mother collected from previous tenants," she wrote numbers, adding columns, taking into account the market rates at the time. More calculations followed. When she finally pushed the paper toward me, I had to blink twice at the number. $58,740, she said. "We'll round it to 60,000 for simplicity." I felt slightly dizzy. "That much?" She nodded, then added, "We could also pursue interest charges. Your parents have essentially been using an interest-free loan of your money for nearly 4 years. We could calculate standard interest rates." "No," I interrupted, "just the rent money. That's enough." After finalizing the paperwork, I called my mother from the law office parking lot. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come to the apartment tomorrow? Bring the property documents." There was a long pause before she agreed. The next morning, I heard her key in the lock. She came in looking nervous, clutching a manila envelope. "I brought the ownership papers," she said, trying to smile. "Everything's here to transfer the apartment to your name. I've already had them prepared." She spread the documents on the kitchen table, the same table where she'd made me sign that rental agreement so many months ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Janice, honey," she said softly, pushing the papers toward me. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I'm asking for your forgiveness. Please don't be angry with me. We can put this behind us." And I cut her off by sliding another document across the table, the demand letter my lawyer had prepared. "You have 2 weeks to pay back the $60,000 you took from me." The moment my mother finished reading the demand letter, all pretense of remorse vanished. She leaped up from her chair with such force it crushed to the floor, and then the screaming began. "You ungrateful little witch," she shrieked. "How dare you do this to your own mother?" The sound echoed off the wall so violently that I swear I saw bits of plaster dust drift down from the ceiling. The neighbors must have thought someone was being murdered. I forced myself to stay calm. "You can scream all you want, Mom. It doesn't change anything. Either you pay what you owe me, or I'll file a lawsuit. Think about it. Fraud charges, legal fees, your reputation in the community. Your choice. She stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard that pictures rattled on the walls. I could hear her stomping down the hallway, still screaming. I thought that would be the end of it for the day. I was wrong. The calls started coming within the hour. First, it was my father. How could you do this to us? He demanded. After everything we've done for you? You're an ungrateful and scrupulous child. I let out a bitter laugh. Ungrateful? And scrupulous? That's rich coming from parents who tricked their own daughter into paying rent for an apartment she owned. Where was your conscience when you were cashing my rent checks every month? He spluttered something about family loyalty, but I hung up. Next came Anna. You're going to ruin everything, she wailed. If mom and dad have to pay you all that money, they won't be able to pay for my college. Is that what you want? To destroy my future? Your future isn't my problem, Anna. Maybe you could try what I did. Get a job, work hard, save money. Novel concept, I know. The calls kept coming. Mom would alternate between screaming and crying. Dad would lecture about family duty and respect. Anna would guilt trip and manipulate. They took turns, tag-teaming me from morning till night. Sometimes they'd call from different phones when I blocked their numbers. After a week of this, my father called with a different tone. We need more time, he said, his voice heavy. Can you give us a month instead of 2 weeks? I considered it. The lawyer had advised me that a month was still reasonable. Fine. 1 month, not a day more. The next 4 weeks were quiet, suspiciously quiet. No more calls, no more guilt trips, no more screaming. I almost started to worry they were planning something. But exactly 1 month after my mother's meltdown in my kitchen, I checked my bank account. There it was, $60,000 transferred in full. It's been 3 months since the money appeared in my account. My Aunt Carol called me last week. She's always been the family gossip, but for once, I was grateful for her need to share information. Your parents had to take out a bank loan to pay you back, she told me, her voice a mixture of concern and fascination. They're really struggling with the payments now. I sat on my couch, my grandmother's couch, listening as she continued. Anna's not in college anymore. They can't afford the tuition. She paused, probably waiting for me to show some sign of guilt or remorse. She's just sitting at home, complaining about how you ruined her life. I thought about Anna, who had never worked a day in her life, who had always expected everything to be handed to her. Maybe it's time she learned to stand on her own feet, I said. That's when a memory hit me, so clear it felt like watching a movie. The day of the wool reading, I'd been getting ready to go with Mom to the notary's office. I'd put on my best black dress, trying to look mature and responsible. Then Mom came into my room, looking worried. Anna's sick. She'd said, she's running a fever. You need to stay home with her. I remember feeling disappointed but accepting it as just another sacrifice for my sister. Now I understand. Anna probably wasn't sick at all. It was just another manipulation, another lie in a long string of deceptions. The question that keeps me up at night isn't why my mother stole my inheritance. I understand greed. What I can't figure out is how she got away with it so easily. I asked Aunt Carol about the notary, and she didn't know much, but her theory makes sense. The notary probably just took my mother's word that she would share the will with the family. Maybe Mom even brought a stack of documents, making it look like she was taking everything home to show us. The worst part is how many little moments now feel tainted. Every time Mom praised me for being responsible with money, was she laughing inside? When she insisted on that formal lease agreement, was she proud of her cleverness? Did she and Dad discuss their deception over dinner? Did they congratulate themselves on their perfect plan? I still live in Grandma's apartment, my apartment. The place feels different now that I'm not paying rent on something I already owned. I've started saving the money that used to go to Mom every month. Sometimes I look at my bank account and smile, thinking about how different things are now. The cafe where I work offered me a promotion to assistant manager last week. Some people might think I don't need the job anymore, now that I'm not paying rent, but I've learned the value of being independent, of having my own money that nobody can take from me. My phone still lights up sometimes with their names. Mom, Dad, Anna. I block their numbers, but they keep trying from new ones. I delete their voicemails without listening. What could they possibly say? Sorry we stole your inheritance. Sorry we made you pay rent on your own property. Sorry we only got caught because some books fell on your head. Most days, I'm okay. I go to classes, work my shifts at the cafe, study in the evening. I've redecorated a bit, trying to make the apartment feel more like my own space and less like a crime scene. But sometimes, usually late at night, the anger comes back. Not just at the theft, but at the years of lies, the casual cruelty of making me think my grandmother hadn't cared enough to leave me anything. My therapist says it's normal to feel this way. She says it's not just about the money or the apartment, It's about trust and family and betrayal. She's helping me work through it, teaching me ways to stay calm and balanced when the memories threaten to overwhelm me. I've started a new tradition. Every Sunday morning, I sit in Grandma's old reading chair by the window, drinking coffee from her favorite mug. I think about her, about how she wanted me to have this place, about how she trusted me to take care of it. In those moments, I feel close to her again, like maybe some part of her knows that the truth finally came out.